All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this NELI Programme webinar. My name's Sarah Hearn, and I work as part of the NELI team at Oxford and Assessment. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about some key questions that have been raised by schools this year. And I'm really pleased to say that I'm joined by my colleague Aaron as well, who's part of the Oxford support team. And he will be telling you a little bit about the calls that he's been running over the last few weeks in a few minutes' time. So just to let you know what to expect from this session, we'll be here until sort of between 4:15 and 4:30. And I'll start off with a recap of the core elements and timeline for the NELI programme, just in case there's anyone on the call today who's new. Then the questions that I'll be addressing will include how does prioritising language assessment, intervention and enrichment help us to meet our early years and key stage 1 goals? Why does evidence matter? Is there a conflict between research and practice? How can we measure and demonstrate success in our language initiatives? And if we've yet to start NELI, what steps can we take now? As always, please do submit your questions and comments into the webinar Q&A. We've got our support team on hand to be able to help. And if there are any questions that we aren't able to answer during the session, we'll be sure to follow up with you over email. So everyone's cameras and microphones are automatically set to off. So to ask a question, you will need to put it in the Q&A. And lastly, the webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with anyone who wasn't able to attend. All right, so starting with our recap. The NELI programme consists of three sort of core pillars. There's Language Screen, which is an assessment which allows schools to select pupils for intervention and track whole class progress. Then there's the online training, which provides a foundational understanding of oral language development and teaches staff how to deliver sessions. And then there's the NELI intervention and NELI whole class, which boost the language skills of those at the bottom and provide whole class language enrichment to all children. The assessment and training element of the programme usually takes between 2 and 6 weeks, and these bits can be delivered in tandem. So you don't need to have completed the training in order to assess the children. You can do them all at the same time. Then NELI and NELI whole class are delivered over 20 weeks, and then all children are reassessed with language screen at the end in order to track progress. Reading screen can also be used at that point, so that's available to use from age 5 for a more detailed understanding of risks to a child's reading comprehension development. Okay, so let's focus on each of these core elements just for a moment. So the quote here illustrates what people tend to like most about Language Screen, which is that it's accurate, it's quick, and children enjoy it. And I'll be talking about Language Screen's accuracy a little bit later, but for those of you who might not have used Language Screen for a little while, I just wanted to note that the assessment has recently been shortened for younger children, and we've also introduced more stringent discontinuity rules. So it now only takes sort of 5 to 12 minutes per child, and with younger children or children with poorer language skills receiving the shortest tests, helping them to stay engaged and making the testing experience more enjoyable for everybody involved. But although it's a shorter test, it's just as reliable. We analysed the data to ensure that we didn't lose any precision for the younger children. So in addition to teaching staff how to deliver the NELI sessions, the NELI training provides a foundational understanding of how oral language develops, why it's important, teaching strategies to support children's language development, and more. And the training is online, so staff tend to like the fact that they can fit it around their schedules, and the comments section provides opportunities to get support from our mentors and also to interact with other NELI practitioners. Then NELI is a language intervention with a core focus on building vocabulary knowledge, storytelling skills, letter sound knowledge and phonological awareness, and active listening skills. But we know that NELI also has broader benefits like improved behaviour in the classroom, increased confidence, and also opportunities for the children to build relationships with the NELI practitioner and the other children in the NELI group. The NELI Whole Class is a companion programme which can be delivered alongside NELI to provide whole class language enrichment to the whole cohort and reinforce the work that the NELI children are doing in their targeted sessions. Now, for anyone that is brand new to the NELI programme, so if you've just joined a school where it's being delivered, you might have just taken over as project lead. This webinar will help you to get an idea of what the NELI programme is about, but we do have a whole library of other webinars which go into more detail about the assessments, how to get started, practical tips on delivery, and so on. So the QR code on the slide will take you to this library of webinars on our Teach NELI website. Once you're there, do explore it. There's lots of other information and resources and so on to help you to get familiar with NELI. And you can also ask us for help by clicking on the little chat bubble in the bottom right-hand corner of that page, the Teach NELI page, or the Oxford website if you go on there. And our support team monitors that live, so you're able to speak to a human and very quickly that way. So speaking of our support team, I mentioned that I'm joined today by my colleague Aaron, who has been leading our onboarding call programme in recent weeks. So Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about how you've been working with schools? Maybe let's start with why schools have been reaching out to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Yeah, I'm working with the support team to engage schools and help schools. So yeah, schools have been reaching out to us, and we've been doing online meetings with Calendly, so you can book the times convenient for you. And as the schools are coming in, there could be anything that you need help with. So some of the reasons why schools contacting me are getting started with NELI. What is NELI? How do I use it? And how to do the assessments, or how to use the QR code. So they're the kind of issues that would come through. And again, one of the things I liked about the pandemic, apart from getting to spend a bit of time with my children, was that teachers got used to having video calls. So I'd much rather have a video call with you. We can share the screen, we can go over what the issues are, and we can make sure that everything's fixed in that quick call. And we're always here to help. And some of the things I usually cover in those calls is, what is NELI, how it would work, how to access the portal, how to access training, how to set up users for training, how to enter students' classes, how to do assessments, how to view the reports, and how to access support. So a one-stop shop for anything that you need any help with. We are here to help and support you. And again, just some reasons, some examples of schools calling. I've had schools contact me because they'd bought NELI, but they didn't know what it was. So again, I'd have a meeting with them, run through how the program works, and answer any questions they had. I had schools that didn't know how to do the assessments. So again, you have a call with me. I'd run through how to use the language screen app, and to use the QR codes and look at the reporting side of it. And other schools maybe wouldn't know about the training, so they'd have a quick call with me, and I could run through all aspects of the training, how it works, timelines, and how it can work for your school. So again, that's what we're here for. I'm here to help and support, and there's no question that we can't deal with. So if you do have problems or issues, we really would like you to reach out to us. We're here to help and support you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. So, yeah, so whether you're, just starting out, not really sure how to get started, whether you've already got a program up and running, but you've maybe got some questions, then do get in touch. If the QR code on the slide, if you scan that, that will take you to Aaron's Calendly link, and you can book in a call with him. So that's great. Thank you very much, Aaron. All right, so that was an overview of the NELI programme for any newbies, and some information on how we can support you. So now let's have a look at how language assessment, intervention and enrichment can help you to meet your goals. So I wanted to start by showing you a selection of profiles for the types of children who you might see in your schools, and how you might have in mind when thinking about how you can be supporting language, whether that's using the NELI programme or in other ways. We've got Elena, who moved to the UK shortly before starting reception. English isn't spoken at home, so she's very much sort of at that beginner EAL level. Then we've got Ben. Ben wants to engage, but he tends to sort of interrupt, and at times he can get a bit frustrated and walk away from activities. Then we've got Stacey. She's kind of quite a quiet child. She struggled to make friends, so she spends a lot of time on her own. She can be slow to follow instructions at times, and she's unfortunately started to disengage. She says she doesn't enjoy school anymore. Then we've got Callum. Callum was making good progress with his phonics in reception, but he seems to have stalled slightly in year one, and he's struggling slightly with his some reading comprehension tasks. And then we've got Aisha. She's a sociable child. She's engaging with sort of age-appropriate vocabulary and sentence structures. And she recently scored 101 on her language screen assessment, which puts her firmly in the sort of average for her age category. So just bear those children in mind, and I'll come back to these profiles a little bit later on with some real life outcomes from children with profiles just like these. All right, so let's take a look at the areas of learning and development in the EYFS framework. And I should say that although NELI can be delivered to children in early Key Stage 1 as well as reception, I'll be focusing on the EYFS framework with the understanding that these goals remain in place throughout Key Stage 1, and really they underpin a child's ability to succeed in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. So I know that you'll all be familiar with these, but the three so-called prime areas are communication and language, physical development, and personal, social, and emotional development. And the framework states that these three areas build a foundation for children to thrive, and they provide a basis for learning in all areas. There are also 4 specific areas listed, and these help to strengthen and develop the 3 prime areas. And these are literacy, maths, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design. So communication and language is one of the 3 prime areas. So it's kind of the area which is most obviously connected to any language initiatives that you might be running in school. And it is easy to think that because language is so embedded in everything that we do, and because language development comes relatively naturally to many children, that there's no need for a structured programme of assessment, intervention, and enrichment in the way that we have for reading and phonics, for example. However, we know from research that language development does not come easily to all children, and that's for a variety of reasons, whether it's genetic or environmental. And in fact, we were already hearing from schools that they were seeing increasing numbers of children starting in reception with poor language skills. And this issue is likely to become increasingly stark as the earliest COVID babies start in reception this September. Now, we also know that looking at data from hundreds of thousands of children, that language difficulties persist over time. So the graph on the slide here shows children's language screen scores over time, with the highest score at the top. I hope you can see my mouse. In fact, I tell you what, get my pointer. The highest scores at the top, the lowest scores at the bottom of each of these data points, and then the median is kind of the small dot in the middle. So as the children get older along the x-axis, the median is sort of moving up as most children's language scores get older, as you would expect. As most children's language scores improve, as you would expect. But as you can see, there's sort of these long tails of underperformance which persist over time. So the problem doesn't go away on its own, and in fact, the gap only gets wider between the children at the bottom and the majority of their peers. So speech and language therapists are, of course, there to help children with language delays to get the support that they need. However, waiting lists for SALTs are extremely high in a lot of local authorities. So embedding a tiered system of assessment, intervention, and enrichment like the NELI programme can help to reduce the pressure on this system by firstly helping schools to identify those who need Tier 2 support using language screen, and then by providing that Tier 2 support with the NELI intervention alongside the Tier 1 enrichment if NELI whole class is used as well. Then you can measure the impact of the intervention so that those who haven't made the progress that you would expect can then be referred to Tier 3 support from ASSAULT with strengthened evidence for their need based on the work you've already done and the language screen scores. And then those who have made the progress, the Tier 2 intervention has helped them catch up, they no longer need to be referred. So it's kind of reducing the pressure on the system. And children do make progress as a result of evidence-based language intervention. We found that children who receive NELI make between 3 and 5 months additional progress in their language skills compared to those who don't, and those effects are the same for children with English as an additional language. And I should say here that what I mean by additional is over and above what we would expect them to make in a year of, going to school and getting older and so on. So coming back to the EYFS framework, I hope it's clear how prioritising language assessment, intervention and enrichment will help you to meet your goals in that prime area of communication and language. But actually, oral language underpins children's development across the curriculum and beyond academic education. So, for example, literacy, the ability to read aloud, to understand what you're reading, to learn how to spell, all of these skills depend on having good levels of oral language. Then, in terms of maths, oral language is a critical aspect in developing counting skills and also being able to deal with the language around arithmetic. And indeed, across the whole curriculum, language is the medium of instruction. So children need good language skills in order to understand what you're teaching them and in order to express the new concepts that they're developing an understanding of. So let's focus just for a moment on literacy. Research indicates that in order to become a skilled reader, a person must first be able to recognise, or in other words, decode the words that they're reading. And then they must also understand the meaning of those words. And these skills are represented as strands in something called Scarborough's reading rope. So the graphic on the slide here visualizes Scarborough's reading rope. And if you haven't come across this idea before, it just essentially describes skilled reading as a rope made of 2 intertwining strands. Upper strand in blue on the graphic here is language comprehension, and the lower strand, which is in green here, is word recognition. Both strands, which themselves are actually made up of lots of threads representing different skills and knowledge, are absolutely essential in order to develop skilled reading. So if you have a weakness in one strand, then that means that you are weaker in your reading abilities overall. So it's fairly obvious that by supporting children's language development, you are supporting language comprehension, so that strengthening one of those strands of the rope. But research actually also suggests that language skills are the foundation for decoding as well. So by providing language intervention and enrichment, you're actually helping to strengthen both strands of the reading rope, listening comprehension and word recognition. So, of course, you'll have, your literacy and your phonics programs in reception, but really in order to give the children the best chance of succeeding in their literacy development, it's really vital to also provide a structured language development program as well. So as I mentioned earlier, throughout its 20 weeks, NELI focuses on building vocabulary knowledge, storytelling skills, and active listening. Then in weeks 11 to 20 of the NELI intervention, it's also called NELI Part 2. The listening games, which are used throughout the first 10 weeks, are extended into letter sound knowledge and phonological awareness activities. And these make up a few minutes of each group and individual session alongside the usual vocabulary and narrative activities. And this time is available to help you to consolidate the children's existing knowledge of letter sounds and to practice their phonological awareness skills. And the programme does provide a whole bank of activity ideas for practicing oral blending and segmenting and sound recognition using the flashcards and resources provided. So this is a small element of the sessions, and it's designed to complement any phonics work that the children are doing or have done already in class. But you're welcome to sort of select your own phonological awareness activities to deliver in this time if you would prefer. And it is all well worth it, we should say. We have evidence that supporting vocabulary, narrative, and phonological awareness skills early on leads to sustainable improvements in literacy. We ran a follow-up study with children in year 2 who had received the NELI intervention in reception, and those children still showed significant improvements in their language and their word reading abilities compared to the control children who hadn't received the NELI intervention. And I'll be talking a little bit more about evidence later on, but it really is extremely rare for an educational intervention to have a long-term evidence of its effects like this. So I said earlier that language underpins children's development beyond academic education. So it's also a vital component in the personal, social, and emotional development, which is obviously another prime area of the EYFS framework. So in terms of social development, children need to be able to communicate in order to build and sustain friendships, to join in with activities, and to develop that sense of belonging amongst their peers and at school. Children with better language skills also form better relationships with their teachers in the first years of school, and obviously with their peers in the classroom. Then in terms of emotional development, good language skills help children to express their emotions and to regulate their behaviour. Research shows that children with better language skills have better self-regulation skills than children who have poorer language skills. And all of this, of course, contributes to their happiness and their self-esteem, and by extension, their engagement with learning at school and their later success. And again, we have evidence that supporting language early on leads to improvements in children's behaviour in the classroom. In one of our trials, children who had received the NELI intervention were rated more highly than controls by teachers on measures of behavioural adjustment. So things like waiting for their turn, sharing with their peers, and so on. So let's come back to the EYFS framework for the last time before we move on. I think we've addressed communication and language, personal, social and emotional development, literacy and maths in relative detail. So hopefully it's already clear that by prioritising a language programme like NELI, you're not taking time away from these core areas, but you are actually contributing towards them. But I wanted to mention here that although I don't have time to go cover them in today's webinar, the NELI intervention and NELI whole class do also help you to meet your goals in physical development, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design as well. So the programme is broken down into 6 topic areas. There's my body, things we wear, people who help us, growing, journeys and time. And if you've already delivered some NELI, you'll know that the topics really lend themselves to extension into real world and role play scenarios. And the programme also uses a variety of different language-rich narrative styles like nursery rhymes, picture stories, personal event narratives centred on things that the children might experience in their own day-to-day life. And it also incorporates listening to stories, using interactive techniques such as role plays, retelling stories with small world figures, making puppet characters, creating their own storybooks, and other multisensory activities. The list really does go on. And so if your school has purchased a NELI whole class subscription, I'd encourage you to take a look at step 23 of the training, the whole class training. There's a document which shows how each area of the EYFS framework is directly supported by activities in whole class. All right, so before we move on to the next section, I'm just going to return to the children that we met at the start, this time showing how they have improved following participation in the NELI programme. And again, these are based on real experiences that have been reported to us by NELI schools. So we've got Elena, the EAL child is now conversing really confidently in English, and her parents are really pleased with the difference in her. Ben has really benefited from the chance to bond with the TA who's been delivering his sessions. It's really helped to boost his confidence, and he's much more able to sort of stay calm and engaged. Stacey has become much more confident. She's been able to engage more with her peers to the point where she is now even confident enough to play the lead in her Year 2 nativity. Callum's phonological awareness has improved. He's blending sounds more confidently, and he's now more confident in his reading comprehension activities as well. And Aisha, who was already doing well, has benefited from a language-rich classroom with staff who feel confident supporting her language and building on the great foundation that she had. And she's now recently scored 112 on Language Screen, which puts her in the top 25% nationally. Okay. So I talked a lot about the evidence for NELI in that section. So I'll spend a little bit of time now reflecting on the role of evidence in education. So first of all, what do we actually mean by research evidence? Well, EEF recently published a guide to using research evidence, and in it they note that evidence is really a broad term that can mean many different things. But when we talk about research evidence specifically, we mean findings from a study or a series of studies that answer clear research questions through planned and deliberate processes for collecting and analysing information. So studies like this include experiments, surveys, focus groups, and so on. So what makes good research evidence? Well, it kind of depends on what question you want to answer. But if you want to establish whether a particular teaching approach or programme has a causal effect on a particular measure, whether that's attendance or behaviour or language, a randomised control trial, otherwise known as an RCT, is generally considered to be the most robust experimental design. And the fundamental principle behind RCTs is actually taught really early on as the fair test concept, which you might even have taught yourself in science lessons. And of course, it does get a little bit more complex when you're scaling this design up to involve large groups of people, but the fundamentals are the same. RCTs involve randomly assigning people or groups of people to different conditions. And a common approach in educational research is for one group to follow the business as usual, so to continue teaching as they usually would, and the other group to introduce the programme in question. The researchers then measure what they want to measure before and after the programme is delivered to see if there is a significant difference between the change in the two groups. RCTs are notoriously challenging to carry out in education. They require a significant commitment from schools and the research team alike, which is why we've always been so grateful to schools who've participated in our research trials. And this is also why you may see educational programmes out there that make impressive claims of strong effects in a short space of time, but they don't necessarily make it easy to find the research evidence which supports these claims. You might also have seen programmes that have been sort of piloted in schools, but without a business as usual control group to compare against. And without a control group, you can't establish whether children would have improved on the outcome without the intervention. Or there might be a control group, but perhaps the allocation was based on circumstances rather than being randomised, which potentially opens up the study to bias. Or there may have been random allocation, but the sample size is really small, with only a handful of schools participating, which is absolutely fine as a proof of concept, but isn't necessarily enough to kind of truly establish the effectiveness of the programme. And finally, you can sort of more confidently trust the results of trials which have been independently evaluated by third parties, so not the group or organisation who published the programme. So where does language and NELI fit into this? Well, the NELI programme, as you see it today, has evolved. Firstly, starting out as decades of research into how language and reading develop more broadly, going into the creation of a programme of assessment, training and intervention, which was piloted in small numbers of schools, then improved, then tested again through efficacy trials with 30 to 40 schools, then improved again, and then tested again, ultimately in the largest randomised control trial of an educational intervention programme to date, which measured the effectiveness of the programme on the language skills of reception children from nearly 200 schools. And I've already spoken about some of the evidence which stemmed from this trial, including NELI's significant effect on children's language skills, behaviour in the classroom, and their later word reading. And the purpose of an effectiveness trial like this is to see how well the programme works when delivered at scale in real life settings with all of the challenges that accompany that. But of course, when schools know that they're part of a trial, they would be trying their best to deliver exactly as intended, and they'd be supported by the trial team throughout. So as an educator working in a school right now, you might be listening to this and wondering, how the programme would hold up when delivered outside of the managed environment of a trial in schools which are increasingly stretched for resources. Sorry, one second. The programme's strong evidence base, due to this programme's strong evidence base in 2020, it was selected by the UK government to receive funding as part of their COVID recovery scheme. This allowed us to roll out NELI to around 11,000 schools over 2 years, so that now around 70% of all schools in England have received access to the NELI programme. And as part of this rollout, schools enrolled over 30,000 staff in our online training, and over 500,000 children were assessed with language screen. And due to the success of this rollout, the government have renewed their funding for 4 years in a row so that we can continue to support schools delivering the programme. So as part of this national scale-up, the NELI programme has been independently evaluated twice, funded by the EEF. And these independent evaluations involved surveys and interviews with staff from schools delivering the programme, and an independent analysis of the language screen data of children in these schools. So these were schools that had just taken up the offer of the funded NELI programme, and they were delivering with the standard level of advice and support offered by the NELI team through the training, emails, and NELI support. In fact, some of these schools might be on the call today. And the evaluations found that children who received NELI in these schools did show significant improvements in their language skills compared to children who didn't receive NELI. In fact, they made 4 months additional progress on average, and this jumped up to 7 months for children eligible for free school meals. So this corroborates our findings from, controlled trials, and demonstrates that NELI is effective even when delivered outside of the tightly controlled trial conditions, and even in the extremely difficult circumstances in schools caused by the pandemic. And it was also found that the language benefits of NELI started to emerge really early in the intervention delivery, and they grew with the number of sessions that were delivered. So the more NELI that was delivered, the better the impact of the intervention. But schools who weren't able to deliver the full programme did still see improvement. All right, so if we look at these findings alongside those from the trials, here is what we know. Children who receive NELI make on average 4 months additional progress in their language skills compared to those who don't. And these effects are the same for children with English as additional language. And excitingly, children who are eligible to receive free school meals benefit even more. They make an average of 7 months additional progress. And this indicates that NELI is helping to close that learning gap that we unfortunately know often exists between children with social disadvantage and their peers. And in addition to the benefits on language, NELI has been shown to improve children's behaviour in the classroom, and in interviews with school staff, we've learned that it also improves children's confidence and their social relationships. And finally, a follow-up investigation has shown that NELI's positive effects last long-term, which again is extremely rare evidence for an educational intervention. So I just wanted to end this section by reflecting on why evidence matters in education and tools you can use. So as educators and people, we do what we know from experience is best. And of course, professional judgment will always play an essential role in the development of our practice. But with limited resources available, it's also vital that we put our assumptions and judgments to the test, to ensure that how we are spending our time and our money is having the impact that we want. It's absolutely okay to find out that something that we're doing isn't working, because that's how we move forward. really the worst thing that we can do is to continue investing resources into programs which just aren't supporting children or staff in the way that we think. And this is why we put NELI and Language Screen through the most rigorous and robust evaluations, so that you can be sure that every minute that you spend on it is really a worthwhile investment. So we'd encourage you to be your sort of natural scientists in the classroom. If you have a new or existing initiative and you want to see how it improves pupils' language, why not use Language Screen and find out for yourself? It's a fantastic tool to help you find out what's working in your classroom. And speaking of what works, the EEF has created a rating system which aims to support school leaders to quickly and easily compare the cost and impact of educational programmes, as well as the quality of the evidence which supports them. There are lots of educational programmes listed on the EEF site. Not all of them are supported by high quality evidence or by trials which show an effect. And that's still really valuable information, because we need to know what doesn't work. We also need to know what we're not sure will work, just as much as we need to know what does definitely work. So we would recommend that you use that to support your research and your decision making when looking for new initiatives to support language or any other aspect of learning. All right, so we've talked about how you might consider evidence when weighing up which initiatives to use in your school. So the next section will focus on how you can measure and demonstrate impact in those initiatives. So decades of working with and speaking to educators, speech and language professionals, and children has helped us to build a pretty solid understanding of what school-based language assessments need to be able to do. So we know that time is limited, so they need to be quick, with no need for time-consuming data entry afterwards. And we know that children are often supported by a range of adults and professionals, so clear reporting, which is easy to share, is vital. You want to know that the results that you're getting are reliable, they're objective, they're accurate, and they're standardized, because it's not enough just to know how a child scored. You need to know how this measures against what would be expected for their age. And last on the list here, but probably the most important, is of course the ability to identify children who would benefit from additional targeted support. So here's how Language Screen meets those needs. So the test is short. As I mentioned earlier, it's now only 5 to 12 minutes per child. It's delivered on a tablet or a phone, and all the scoring is automated, so there's no time-consuming data entry or gathering of materials involved around the testing time. Once the assessment's complete, you can log into the OCSED portal and download results immediately. And we've also streamlined the administration processes involved in setting up your OCSED account and registering children for assessment. Clear guidance is provided on the website, and live support is available from the OCSED team. And also, of course, you can book in that one-to-one call with Aaron when you sign up to help you get started. So, it's never been easier than it is now, actually, to kind of get started with NELI and with Language Screen. The reports provide an overall summary table for the class or the year group, and then there's an individual results page for each pupil, which can be separated out and shared with parents or external specialists as needed. And in the overall results summary table, children are ranked by their standard score. And where children have more than one assessment, so for example, after you've reassessed at the end of the year, these assessments are grouped together so that you can easily see their progress. And we do recommend that you record which children have received NELI on the portal, so that you can really quickly spot them in your report. So just at a glance from this report, you can see that Corey at the top and Broderick at the bottom, they both received NELI, and they both showed stark increases on their Language Screen scores. So Broderick jumped from 85 to 100, and Corey jumped from 69 to 89. And then Olin in the middle, who didn't receive NELI, he started the year only just below average at 91, and finished the year at 90. And one thing to point out here is that although Olin's score stayed relatively static, that doesn't mean that he didn't make any progress in his language. It isn't the same as saying that he scored 18 out of 20 at the beginning of the year and then scored the same score at the end of the year. It just means that his language abilities progressed pretty much as we'd expect over the course of a year of getting older and being in school. So he started the year just below average for a nearly 5-year-old, and then he ended the year just below average for a 5-year and 8-month-old. And when children are assessed with both language screen and reading screen, their results are mapped against a simple view of reading plot for a more detailed understanding of risks to a child's reading comprehension development. Using these plots, you can see whether a child would benefit from support for their language development, their reading development, or both, and you can monitor their individual progress or that of the entire cohort. So just using this class as an example, I can quickly see that the children at the bottom in the yellow area are those that would benefit from a language intervention like NELI, and the children on the top left would benefit from support for reading or perhaps even a referral for a dyslexia assessment. And then there's one child in the bottom left who likely needs a bit of support with both decoding and language. Aside from language screen, there's a range of paper assessments that you can use to track specific aspects of the children's development throughout NELI, and all of these can be found at the back of the teaching handbooks. The purpose of all of these assessments is to monitor progress and also to enable you to see and to demonstrate to others the ongoing impact of the programme. The assessment of narrative, speech and grammar is the one which will inform the work that you do with the children in the narrative section of their individual session. You complete that assessment with them at the start of the programme, set 3 targets to work on with them. So for example, in this record form, it might be a bit small for you to see, but the practitioners decided to target use of past tense, use of pronouns, and identifying a character in the story. And then you repeat the assessment at regular intervals or whenever you think the child has met their targets, and you set new ones. So one idea of how you could demonstrate progress with this is by recording the children's stories and their targets over time. You'll be really amazed when you look back at how their abilities have developed, and this would be a lovely document to send home to parents as well. Okay, so if you're weighing up the idea of getting started with NELI, let's just briefly talk about why it's worth setting up the programme and delivering any sessions that you can before the summer holidays. So as I mentioned earlier, the independent evaluation that happened recently found that the language benefits of NELI started to emerge early in intervention delivery and grew with the number of sessions that were delivered. So the more NELI that was delivered, the better the impact of the intervention. But even the schools who weren't able to deliver the full programme did still see improvement. And it's also been found that NELI doesn't just improve language. From that very first session, the structure and the routines that are built into NELI really help to improve children's active listening skills and their behaviour more broadly. And we've also heard from practitioners that they see improvements in children's confidence very quickly in the intervention. There are also a couple of broader benefits of getting started with NELI for you and your team. So firstly, delivering some NELI, no matter how far you get, will help you feel better prepared to start earlier next year. It means that you'll have completed the training, you'll have organised your resources, you'll have found a space and a time in the timetable that works well for sessions. You will also have sort of got a sense of how the sessions are structured, how to use the handbook, and so on. And all of this will make the process of getting started feel a bit less intimidating next year. So it's a fantastic use of time. And finally, I mentioned completing the training. If you haven't done so already, I would strongly recommend making this a priority for this year. The training isn't just about how to deliver NELI, it also teaches you how language develops, how to spot children whose language isn't developing as we'd expect, and it provides teaching strategies which can be used immediately in any interactions that you have with children. So if you want to get started or just try NELI out, here are sort of 3 key steps. Step 1 would be to start by assessing a number of children in your class. You could start with 5. You may want to choose to focus on children who you think may be experiencing language difficulties. So, for example, if they don't seem to be understanding your instructions, if they're showing poor behaviour, they're having difficulty making friends, if they're learning English as an additional language. I'm just thinking of those profiles that we looked at earlier. Assessing these children will help you to check for language delays and also help you to track the progress that they make between now and the end of the year. And this is especially important if you're planning to deliver any language interventions. Step 2 would be to enrol staff on the NELI training and to complete the training. I've already talked about this one a lot, so I won't spend time on this. But if you have an active NELI subscription, you can enrol staff by emailing us on support@teachneli.org, or you can just go onto your Oxhead account if you're an admin and enrol staff in the training tab as well. And step 3 is to start by delivering the first 4 or 5 weeks of NELI. So as I've mentioned, the benefits of the intervention start to emerge early. So by starting the intervention now and seeing how far you can get, you're already starting to build children's language skills, to improve their active listening and their behaviour, to build their confidence. And you're obviously testing the programme out and getting yourself prepared for next year. All right, so we're running over time, so I'll wrap up there. But if you have any questions at all, please do get in touch with us on support@teachneli.org. It's the usual email address. And if you are interested in getting started with NELI, or if you want some advice about your existing programme, I'd really recommend that you book in a call with Aaron. Just scan the QR code on the slide and go to Aaron's. That will take you to Aaron's calendar and you can book in a session. Right, thank you very much for joining everyone today, and we'll see you again next time.